Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to, I guess this would be considered like a count out. Remember when we would
Well, let's keep it kind of loose. Yeah, we won't be so.
we would do the top 10 thing, but
Yeah.
it was count out. So yeah.
Podcast but we're going to keep this one looser, right? We're not necessarily going to count things down. We're just going to discuss other ideas. We're going to have a pitch session. You want to do that? Pitch.
Yeah, it's our pitch session. It's the Dark Side of the Ring Season 3 pitch session. In case any of the Dark Side producers are out there listening. Or just the friendos want to chime in. And by the way, at any time during this episode, if you have ideas of your own for Season 3 of Dark Side of the Ring to pitch, drop them in the comments below because we want to hear them. In fact, just stop right now. Just do it now. Just pause and do it now.
Sure.
So anyways, as you guys may or may not know, for the past couple of months, we've been reviewing. We kicked off with Dark Side of the Ring Season 2. And then over the past couple months, we've been doing Dark Side of the Ring Season 1. And now that that's sort of concluded, we did the Moolah episode yesterday. We figured, hey, why not milk this for a little bit more? Season 3 is probably a little ways off. Hopefully they will do one. In fact, didn't one of the producers say something about the possibility of going to Japan?
I believe that was the quote, yes.
I'm assuming that preceded
Yes.
the horrible state of affairs that
Yes.
the entire globe is under right now. But
Yeah,
that won't stop us from doing these pitches, Larson.
exactly.
So, fun fact, this episode was originally going to be produced as an episode of 10 for the Win. And in fact, I have like 8 entries written, done, actually written.
Did we actually select it so there was 5 for each of us? Like 5 that were your idea and 5 that were mine? I don't
No,
remember
because
exactly.
for one thing, we did a lot of the same ones. And number 2, but I did do this. Like, you did throw your ideas at me, and then I included the ones that I thought were sort of best in there, and then added the ones that I think we both sort of understood were like, okay, these would work.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do a live reading of 10 for the Win. One reason why I elected to, I sort of pulled the trigger on this one myself in terms of like, I don't think this will actually work, is actually twofold. Number one, when I started writing this, the speaking out thing happened. And all of a sudden it became, okay, that will probably need a bit more historical context for that to be assessed. From a purely business point of view, though, for us, when we talk about the speaking out stuff, and we've been happy to talk about that to the degree that we feel appropriate to talk about it, we haven't let that story dictate. I'm sorry, we haven't let the business side of things dictate how we cover that story. We've covered it to the degree that we want to cover it. That being said, every episode that we produced about that has been demonetized by YouTube. And with something like 10 for the Win, where we do put some expense into, we pay an editor, the Rob Zerber, to do it.
Yeah.
To have something that's demonetized just sort of wouldn't make any business sense. And on top of that, sort of the bigger issue was 10 for the Win's a comedy show. And talking about things, especially like speaking out, under the context of comedy just doesn't seem right at all. No. So I was like, as good as I think the idea is, I'm just not going to do that. And on top of that, a ton of these other, like, it's Dark Side of the Ring. Can you, how much do you really want to joke about topics like, for example, I've got on here, the Dynamite Kid,
Yeah, depressing stuff.
There's a lot of really depressing stuff going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott Hall's on this list. And the genesis of his, as he describes it, PTSD, is pretty dark stuff, and it doesn't really feel great to joke about it.
No.
I mean, I can find humor and stuff like that, but it just doesn't feel right. So especially with the speaking out stuff. So we'll just dive into it. Here's one of the pitches that I had at number 10. And this one, I'll be honest with you, you make plenty of jokes about Arn Anderson and Sid and the scissors incident.
Yeah. So we've covered this pretty extensively in other episodes, 10 for the Win. We talk about it pretty much endlessly. The basic gist is European tour, 1993, some heavy drinking in a hotel bar leads to an argument over Ric Flair between Sid and Arn Anderson, which leads to a fight in a hotel hallway. And eventually, they end up stabbing each other with scissors. Arn gets the worst of it. And I believe he asked to say to Sid, "You're killing me," for Sid to stop.
Yeah.
Sid is fired. And it's an interesting tale. I mean, it's one of those. It's just one of those weird incidents that happens in pro wrestling.
It's a weird pro wrestling thing, yeah.
And then, I mean, also, like, Sid tried to threaten somebody with a squeegee once. That's
squeegee,
a separate weird story.
He brought like a chair leg, I think, originally to this particular fight.
Yeah, and it was Arn who had the scissors.
Yeah. Hey, could you plug out and plug back in? So yeah, I mean, one sort of thing that might be stopping this particular thing would be the fact that Arn Anderson himself, I think, has said that he has no desire to cover this ground anymore and talk about it. Sid, in one of his most recent shoot interviews, did talk about it in typical Sid fashion. His accounting of things was less detailed than there is actually out there a compilation of various shoot interviews with wrestlers who were present for the proceedings, if you will. And it's fairly comprehensive. Like, it is like a
it's like Rashomon, yeah.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. You love bringing that example.
Yeah,
It's like, right, exactly. And so it is out there, and so there are plenty of other wrestlers, I'm sure, they could get on the record for this.
Yeah. They're like, there's
Scorpio Sky. I'm sorry.
No,
Too Cold Scorpio.
Too Cold Scorpio.
Yeah.
If they want to reference the
Scorpio
previous,
Sky was there in 1993.
the previous
when he was like 12.
shoot interviews, Vader spoke about it, I believe. He was there. I mean, I guess you could try to get something from one of those Sid shoot interviews.
Sid seems okay to talk about it, so they could bring in Sid.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that it would be. So look, nobody died. I mean, thank God. All that really resulted from this was Sid was fired from WCW, but he came back. He was a very back and forth guy. So I mean, this would fall under some element of dark comedy. I mean, it is very dark because a guy got stabbed almost to death. But yeah, I mean, everybody lived, and it's just a weird wrestling story that was fueled by alcohol and big egos.
Here's a potential angle to take with it too, if you want to broaden the scope a bit. So apparently, preceding the incident in the hotel bar, so we have the international flight from the States to England, United Kingdom somewhere, and then my understanding is they flew in, hopped on a bus, and had to take another like 12-hour bus ride before they even got to the hotel. So just the kind of arduous, demanding road schedule that wrestlers were under, and to a certain degree, if you work for WWE, still under.
Yeah.
It's taxing mentally, physically. And if you're, or like at the end of like a 30+ hour travel day, nerves are going to be frayed, tensions are going to rise.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, though, like, Sid was one jugular away from like changing wrestling history forever, because this is 1993. He still hadn't, won the WWF championship, wrestled in the main event at WrestleMania against like The Undertaker where he crapped his pants or whatever. Maybe allegedly. The whole WCW run where he snapped his leg in half, that number, whatever. A lot would have changed. The entirety of his career prior to that would have now been listed on the WWE Network as, I don't know,
such and singles competition.
Insane, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could be a fun one. Another one here at number 9, the end of WCW. Now this was covered in a WWE DVD, which was actually really, really well produced one. It was even covered in their like exhaustive documentary series, The Monday Night War. The problem with all that is that, as is with war, the history is written by the victors. And so these were WWE produced things.
Yeah.
And I recently read the Guy Evans book, Nitro, The Rise and Inevitable Fall of Ted Turner's Wrestling Company, or whatever it's called. It's a terrific book. It's really long. I was shocked that, me, a dullard, could sit through the entire thing. But it's an absolutely fascinating book. It really is. And they detail the final days of WCW. And a lot of that stuff, like the actual business angling that Bischoff was going through to get control of WCW there at the end. A lot of that minutia was not covered in the Monday Night War. And in fact, when I went back and watched some of those segments dealing with that, some of it they just plain either lied about or conflicted with this book anyways. There was some really interesting stuff in there. And I think that coming from the point of view of, a more objective viewpoint, I think would be an interesting one.
Yeah, as we saw with that Ruthless Aggression series that WWE just put out, they are not above, serving up some revisionist history for their consumer base to take in. But yeah, a more objective, as you put it, telling of that particular story about the final days of WCW, what led up to it, the dealings that Bischoff was undergoing to try to gain control of the company, find a TV home for it, and just how everything fell apart and Vince swooping in, right at the very end to buy the company. It's interesting stuff.
And another thing that this could be appealing in terms of the one central theme throughout both seasons of Dark Side of the Ring is this idea that Vince McMahon operates as this sort of like MCU Phase 1 Thanos, where like he's sort of lurking in the background. Sometimes he's a bit more directly related to these dark events, and sometimes he's indirectly related. But like through almost every single one of these episodes, and I know there are exceptions, Vince McMahon is playing a role, and usually it is to the detriment of whoever is being featured.
Yes.
Which is a fascinating concept. So and again, here Vince McMahon lurking in the background, waiting to scoop up WCW. But there are also some interesting aspects, like for example, the final Nitro. They had it booked out, I think, the Saturday prior to it airing. That Friday prior, WWE had announced on their website that they had purchased WCW. And they came in on that Saturday. They got the script for Nitro, basically ripped it up and rewrote it according to how they want it to go down, what wrestlers they were most interested in. And then Vince McMahon decided that Ric Flair versus Sting should be the main event, which was very interesting because if he was going after, let's say if he really had a keen eye on Booker T and Scott Steiner, I would imagine he could have easily just said, okay, that's going to be your main event. But instead, he chose to celebrate WCW with their two franchise players, which I thought was a very interesting thing. If nothing else, Vince McMahon, it seems to be, I mean, we've always also heard that the man is a student of wrestling. I mean, I know he has been the pivotal central figure of wrestling, but to honor WCW in that way, pretty interesting to me,
It is interesting. It definitely is.
Also putting a spotlight on the original plans if Bischoff was able to get WCW, how that was going to serve as the season finale. They're going to take a couple months off, and Scott Steiner was supposed to be like their champion, their monster heel champion that nobody could face, nobody could beat. And then when they pick it back up whenever they got a new TV deal, we'd go from there. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, that is interesting stuff.
Next up, FMW, Frontier
Martial
Arts Wrestling. Yeah. So these death matches that sprang forth from FMW, which FMW was a very influential Japanese company that was sort of, took their inspiration from the Texas deathmatch stuff and brought it to Japan, which then had a global influence. ECW caught on and was like, oh wow, look at what they're doing over there. Let's try to adopt some of this stuff over here. It's just an absolutely fascinating story about this promotion. I believe you mentioned that it would be interesting to do an episode on Hayabusa, FMW's most popular star. And once he had his horrible, tragic neck injury in the ring, FMW basically was able to close, or had to close.
Yeah. But even go back, Atsushi Onita, the founder, of the company, started it back in like mid 1989, and in 1990 it was when he first started really putting on, what a few years later was really deathmatch wrestling, exploding barbed wire matches, a ring out in the middle of a body of water with a sickle involved, a lot of explosions, a lot of barbed wire. FMW was kind of at the forefront of a lot of that stuff in the early 90s, and it definitely caught on here in the States with ECW and later XPW, more on that later, and eventually CZW. So in terms of influence, you got to say FMW in terms of modern pro wrestling is pretty high up there.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And this is honestly one of those things that I don't even know that much about the ins and outs of FMW. And so this is an episode that I personally would love to see because, one thing about the Dark Side series is that I go into some of these episodes. It's like, I do not consider myself a wrestling historian. I know a bunch of useless stuff about wrestling, but and I know more about some things than others. But I didn't know anything about the Herb Abrams company. I don't know anything about that. I went into that cold, and I was like, okay, this is really cool. This is really interesting. Now I know more stuff. So it'd be fun to get some info about that too.
Definitely. Yeah, within 4 months of Hayabusa's neck injury, the company closed its doors. But in 2015, it returned. I wonder if they're still running shows. I
don't know.
Oh, yeah. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, it is. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Next up at number 7, the Dynamite Kid. This is just a depressing story, but thematically speaking, it fits right in with what Darkside does because they are not afraid to spotlight just depressing life stories of some of these wrestlers, man. And this fits right into that. Dynamite Kid, one of the most influential wrestlers of today, or of his day, rather. A smaller guy who just gobs and gobs of steroids, bulked up to just a disgusting degree, but also had sort of a very mixed reaction when it comes to other wrestlers speaking about him. People by and large seem to like him, even though he was a bit of a prick.
Yeah, he was noted for ribbing wrestlers backstage, seemingly taking it way too far.
Yeah.
If you talk to the Rougeau brothers.
Yes.
Because there was a noted altercation between them and the Dynamite Kid. But yeah, it's the story of a dude who, during his time in Japan against Tiger Mask, put on some wildly influential matches.
Yeah, big time.
And eventually, made his way over the States, bulked up a lot, had a really bad back injury that he tried to wrestle through, and within a few years of leaving the ring, I believe he was in a wheelchair.
Yeah. So according to the small amount of research I did, by the age of 33, his body was so wrecked that he had to retire. Yeah, because of drugs, his in-ring style, obviously his steroid use. His body was wrecked. By 39, he had lost the use of one of his legs, and I think that's when he had to get into a wheelchair.
Yeah.
His personal life was also a disaster. His ex-wife was once quoted as saying, "She once thought of killing herself and her kids rather than have to deal with a future with him." That's pretty dark. I remember there was that one. I couldn't find it again, but wasn't there that documentary
TV interview he did, right? Yeah.
Where he was like, he just very nonchalantly said that one time he put a shotgun to her head or something like that. Yeah, this dude was messed up. He was super messed up.
Yeah.
But, so there you go. Make a great episode of Darkside. After that, we've got the bad guy, Scott Hall. If anybody were to go back and listen to he had a 2-part podcast interview with Stone Cold Steve Austin, I think in 2015, I want to say.
Yeah.
He had done some episodes of the podcast, but at least one of them, I remember, he did not seem like he was sober during it. this one, the two-parter that he did on Stone Cold's podcast, and then also that E60 mini documentary.
Yeah, that's where you really got that's the first time I heard the story of what kind of led to his PTSD and whatnot. Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he like a bouncer when this happened?
He was a bouncer at a club, and there was some incident in the club. He goes outside. The dude brandishes a weapon. There's struggle for the gun, and during the course of that, Scott Hall shoots the guy and kills him.
Apparently, he's right there with him, and the gun struggle happens, and the gun goes off in the guy's head. Mm-hmm. That's horrifying. And he said that is what led him down the path to, having problems with substance issues. And it wasn't until he, I think it was in the course of going through therapy that he realized, I suffer from PTSD from that incident all those years ago. Mm-hmm. And he's been on and off with his substance abuse issues. Obviously, he was part of DDP's accountability crib.
Yep.
But his story is such a fascinating one that it would make. I think I would love for them to do an episode on him. He's so great, and he's also obviously a friend of the show. Like he did like interview stuff for like a bunch of the episodes. I think in the first season. Yeah, like he was the conspiracy theorist in the Montreal Screwjob. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great interview.
A great interview.
Like in terms of and I've said this before, in terms of the most talented wrestlers to have never won a world title.
Oh yeah,
he's got to be way towards the top of that list.
It's shocking that he never won at least the WCW title. Like when you think of how much money really could have been made off of the Outsiders as a team, but then also feuding with each other, and the route they took it was like Scott Hall was just drunk and Kevin Nash had to deal with that. It's infuriating. It's like, why did it have to boil down to that? Why couldn't you have done like, a babyface versus babyface type thing? How great would that have been? That would have been awesome,
man.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It would have been awesome, man. That would. I mean, like, it's easy to forget the guy who started the thing that led to the NWO was Scott Hall.
Yeah.
Showing up on Nitro.
Yeah.
In a lot of denim.
In a lot of so much denim. Yeah.
Saying who I am, but you don't know why I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, it really is a bummer he never won any world championships. At the same time, that one Stone Cold podcast, he didn't really seem to worry about that much.
No, that was the thing about him also, is that he had such a he seems like such a smart guy. And, he would tell Steve, that's one thing he would say is like, I never cared about winning the title. He said, I always viewed a wrestling company as a football team. Everybody has their role. And when everybody does their role right,
make money.
Everybody makes money. So, and his stories about being in AWA are hilarious. He's such a great storyteller. Mm-hmm. He's such a great storyteller. I don't need all the money.
It's too cold.
It's too cold. I'll have to go back and listen to that.
That one interview is great. It's fantastic.
Next up on the list of pitch ideas we have Rob Black and XPW. Now, Larson, you and we could be interviewed for this episode. We were at the epicenter of XPW. We were there when Supreme, rest in peace, was lit on fire by
a match that for a number of years ruined hardcore wrestling for me.
Yeah, that was when I was.
See a man inadvertently get lit on fire, running around the ring. It's a mental image that I'll never be able to get out of my mind ever.
This is like an even darker version of the Herb. Like at least Herb Abrams was like a real charismatic, like lovable guy. People loved him no matter what weird things he did.
That seems to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Rob Black, not so much. So this was a pornographer in the Los Angeles area in the late 90s, early aughts, and trying to maybe seeing either the writing on the wall with where ECW was headed, or simply just saying, hey, ECW has the East Coast lockdown. We want to do the same thing, but on the West Coast. But we want to inject it with a healthy dose of pornography, because he was a pornographer. I think he was was it Extreme Studios that he...
That would make sense.
Okay. So they also had I think like a wrestling school of some sort. I know that one of their featured guys was what's the hardcore kid? Was that his name? Yep. And he runs Santino Brothers now.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Yeah. And he was one of their featured guys, along with Supreme. There was the Messiah.
Yeah.
There was also, and it was crazy stuff. Like their TV show was just train wreck crazy. And they'd bring in all sorts of ECW originals. Of course, that's where the big fall with New Jack and Vic Grimes.
Yeah.
The scaffold one happened.
Well, they even at the one ECW pay-per-view they had in LA. At the Olympic Auditorium. We went to that.
Yes.
And there was a crew of XPW talents sitting ringside. They tried to stage their own invasion of sorts during the show. It was like ECW if he was like even more obnoxious.
Yes, that's it. No, that's exactly.
They were trying to be more obnoxious, more in your face.
Yeah.
More controversial than ECW was.
So like with ECW, they brought in They legitimately tried to bring in amazing wrestlers. Like they brought in luchadors, they brought in Japanese wrestlers. They had great matches at their core. Obviously, they went and they did the extreme stuff as well. But XPW really tried to take the extreme nature of ECW
and make up the entire promotion.
And just do that. And Rob Black was just an unapologetic, I mean, the guy was trying to inject. If you look at any of the covers of their DVDs, they had like Lizzie Borden and I forget the other girl's name that lit Supreme on fire. Veronica
Kane.
Kane, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Veronica Kane, yeah.
Like stripping down, and they would do these interstitials in between like the matches. It would just all of a sudden randomly be like a junkyard, and there'd be like a chick like stripping. Of course, behind the scenes stuff was crazy too, because you had like their main guy, the Messiah, who was like their Raven, basically. Allegedly, he was having an affair with Rob Black's girlfriend, Lizzie Borden, or wife, or whoever it was. They were romantically involved. And then Rob Black, allegedly sent a couple of his guys to the Messiah's apartment to like in Granada Hills, where we used to live, to cut his dick off. And they didn't, but they ended up cutting off one of his thumbs.
Yeah.
And that's not a storyline. That actually happened. So this would be like a no-brainer. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure you could totally get everybody in to interview them. Like last I checked, Rob Black still does stuff on YouTube. I think he had a podcast or a show or something he was trying to do.
And then a lot of the former ECW wrestlers that would do shows for XPW. You mentioned New Jack. Shane Douglas did a lot of stuff for him.
Yeah.
I don't see why they wouldn't be willing to have conversations about stuff. I mean, like, I don't know if the Messiah would want to do it or not, considering what happened to him, but you never know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, dude, it's been 20 years. You would think. I mean, he looks at his hand every day and sees that he doesn't have a thumb. And then I even went to. Were you there for that show?
Yeah. It was in Santa Clarita. They went to the show after that happened, and people were giving crap about missing a thumb.
Yeah, like he was in there doing a promo, and somebody said, "Thumb him in the eye," and he said, "Who said that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's not the right response, man. That's not the right response. You got to own that.
You should give the dude a thumbs up."
I know exactly. Here you go. So yeah, dude, I don't know. This would be great. This would be absolutely great.
Oh, it'd be fantastic.
After that, we've got, of course, the ninth wonder of the world, Chyna. Man, when the last couple of years of her life really kind of made it seem like she was on a turnaround, Like I think we had known that they were shooting like a documentary of her.
They were,
some sort.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, it's interesting to me that Chyna at the absolute height, at one point, I read that in 1999, the SummerSlam main event was supposed to be Steve Austin versus Chyna for the WWF Championship. Wow. That was at the absolute height of the WWF at the time. And that was going to be the main event. And then it turned to Stone Cold Triple H. And Stone Cold didn't want to job Triple H, so they brought in Mankind. But, dude, I'm telling you, as a fan, as remembering what it was like to be a fan back then, The only problem they would have had is the crowd might have been cheering for Chyna. I could totally see that as having been the case. She was so over. If you go back and watch that episode of Raw, the Corporate Rumble.
The Corporate Rumble, man.
She was the #1 contender for the championship for a spell for like a short period of time. And then I think Mankind like probably beat her in a match or something I don't know how it went down. But
that pop you hear when she comes out at the end of that Corporate Rumble,
it was huge. And
insane.
They could have. And the funny thing is, I do firmly believe that Chyna was so unique that nobody has come along since then. And you saw maybe hintings of this with Nia Jax just like a year ago or whatever. When didn't she enter like the men's Rumble 2 years ago?
Yeah.
She had a standoff with Dean Ambrose and they were going to have Dean versus Nia.
They were going to do a match. Yeah, they teased it.
They were going to do a match. Nia Jax is the only person to come along who really could have seen. I mean, well, actually, that's not true because didn't they have Beth Phoenix do something in the men's Rumble?
She was in a men's Rumble too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say 2012, sometime around there.
But like the fact that they were really, I mean, Chyna won the Intercontinental Championship. I don't know that anybody has come along since Chyna who, I mean, yeah, you can book anybody. You can, if the writing is good, you can book anybody to be legitimate. But Chyna really felt legitimate, a legitimate main eventer.
Yeah.
So I think that like she is so unique in that respect that nobody has come along since her that it's like, oh man, like, yeah, it doesn't even make sense for her to be in the women's division. Like she needs to be competing against heavyweight men and like, you believe it. And then unfortunately, you know, what happened with her basically being run out of the company, her having substance abuse issues, her doing the pornography, which in and itself is not like a negative thing necessarily, but you know,
it was viewed as such by WWE because they're trying to go for a more, you know, family-friendly product, you know, appeal to a larger demographic, and they had an issue. You go in China on Google, and what would come up apparently, as Triple H would put it, it would be all her adult cinema endeavors rather than wrestling stuff, and they didn't want to be associated with that.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about pornography. Like, doing pornography in and itself is not a bad thing. I mean, it's to each their own. But it does, and to this day, it limits where you can go in your career if you want to go back to WWE, if you want to do legitimate mainstream movies, if you want to do this, that, or the other. Getting into pornography definitely limits that your opportunities. And unfortunately, with the WWF, that's what happened with her. And eventually, she did get inducted into the Hall of Fame, but it was with DX. It was after her passing. So yeah, an absolute shame that ended up happening, and she didn't get her true moment where she was able to live on and get her moment,
recognition in Hall of Fame induction, where she's able to, you know, deliver her induction speech, her acceptance speech, and all that. That would have been great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that with guys like Jake Roberts. We've seen it with Scott Hall, that they've been able to come back from basically the brink of death, seemingly, and be rejuvenated and be a positive, you know, and have a positive outcome. And unfortunately, in her case, she died at 46. So that alone is probably a pretty sad thing, but it'd make for an interesting episode. I do have Speaking Out on here, but you know, everybody knows about that. I do think that Speaking Out is probably too fresh. There's still a lot of unknowns. So yeah, I'll move on to the next one and go with Rikidozan.
Yeah, we covered it in the Weird Shoot Moments episode 10 for the win. In short, he had a match against what's the dude's first name? Kimura. The Kimura Lock's name.
Yeah.
He was a noted fighter. Rikidozan, world famous professional wrestler. They had a match. Rikidozan shoots on Kimura, knocks him out in the middle of the ring. Sometime after that, Rikidozan is murdered in a nightclub using a pea-soaked knife. And then there's been a lot of rumors that maybe Kimura was potentially involved in that due to the public embarrassment of getting knocked out by a professional wrestler.
And I'm pretty sure weren't there some shenanigans with like the Yakuza as well? Like they were connected to Kimura, perhaps. Apparently Kimura wrote an entire book saying that he didn't do it. He didn't have anything to do with that. Which to me kind of just speaks that he probably did. It's a little overboard. When you're saying, "Oh, I didn't do this. I'm going to write an entire book on the subject."
What is as bad as when OJ did the special How I Would Have Done It?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, the writing a book back then was like the equivalent to doing a Notes app apology. So yeah, I think that, one of the stumbling blocks here might be, obviously there's not going to be many people who are still around to speak on like it personally and what actually happened in the moment at the time. I'm sure there are family members and there are obviously historians that can speak on this. I think it's a fascinating story, given especially how much many people probably don't know just how popular Rikidozan was.
Oh man, huge name.
Like, you can take Hogan, Austin, The Rock, and John Cena, combine them all, and you're kind of looking at the popularity of Rikidozan back then. Like, he was huge. He has statues erected in his honor. And so a name on that level for this to happen is a fascinating story. Yeah. Just an absolutely fascinating story that I think everybody would really be into. And honestly, like, I think that his name should be celebrated with today's audience who might not know anything about him, might not know much about him at all. I don't know that much about the guy.
Yeah, I don't really know that much about him either.
So I think that would be a really interesting story to tell. The one thing, I guess, moving on from that, originally I think of the number 3 spot. And again, I don't really have a solid story here that I really know of, because I don't know much about the history. I got to finish reading that book. Is the start of professional wrestling being a work.
Yeah.
You could say fake, whatever you want to say, with the Goldust Trio.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that there is probably some sort of dark story to be told when wrestling went from being a legitimate thing to them figuring out, hey, we need to determine who is going to be the champion. We need to determine how these finishes are going to go. We can't have these 5-hour matches anymore. We need to book exciting finishes. Like, all that stuff was determined, basically, was figured out by 3 guys, Billy Sandow, Ed Strangler Lewis, and I always forget who's the third one of the Goldust Trio.
Toots Mont.
Toots Mont, yeah, exactly. They basically created wrestling the way we know it right now.
Yeah.
So,
another good one, another nominee would be episode on Black Saturday.
Yes.
Then you can encompass Vince buying up the territories in that story as well, because Black Saturday was really kind of the culmination in a lot of ways of that narrative when he took over the time slot on WTBS for WBF did Georgia Championship Wrestling, and that didn't work out for Vince really at all. But it just illustrates the levels, the lengths he was going to unify the territory system under his umbrella and create a national wrestling promotion.
If there's any metaphor that translates to Vince being Thanos, it's the territories being the Infinity Stones and national TV being the Gauntlet. It's funny because I'm in the middle of reading Death of the Territories right now, which illustrates that. And my God, this guy was literally in the early 80s just going from territory to territory. All right, how much do you want? 250,000? Okay, here. Or no, it was like, for like the LA territory, it was like 520,000 for the territory, and then another 520,000 for like something else. I forget what, like I don't know, a TV station or something. So yeah, he was just throwing money around left and right, just completely and totally buying the country of wrestling. That alone would make for a fascinating story. I just think it's like a really sprawling one.
Yeah, it would be.
But and we've seen hints of it throughout the series. Talking about what was it, when he was trying to buy the Canadian Stampede Wrestling.
There's that. There was the Dino Bravo episode.
Dino Bravo, yeah, that's right, yeah. So yeah, that's interesting stuff. And the final one that we have on here, which I know you've been championing, Vince McMahon versus the United States of America, of course, the mid-90s.
Steroid trial, yeah.
Steroid trial with Vince McMahon, which almost sent him to prison, and in the end allowed him to say he beat the government of the United States.
Yeah, it was the closest point probably in Vince's life that the empire that he built was maybe on the verge of crumbling. You know, he faced the prospect of years in prison, you know, for assisting talent to get steroids. You know, the government alleged that he had a doctor under his employ that was helping him facilitate all that. Yeah, he managed to avoid jail time and I believe was acquitted, right?
Yeah, God, there was a lot of details there. It was like the case that they made was pretty lousy, and there were some stumbles from the prosecution. So yeah, I don't know if the charges were dropped or if he was actually acquitted. I don't know if it actually went to a jury or not.
No, acquitted.
Okay, he was acquitted. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Nails is one of the prosecution's witnesses.
That's right. Yeah, he was, and they were able to paint him. The defense was able to paint him as a disgruntled former employee, a guy who attacked Vince McMahon legitimately. So that didn't help them. And then Hogan, of course, you know, brother, saw the writing on the wall, decided to help out Vince McMahon, and he testified in his defense. So yeah, that would be a good one. And talk about it once again. This is the Infinity War of Vince McMahon, the steroid trial. So, anyways, but in this case, Thanos ended up winning, and you know, so yeah, there you go. Anyways, there you go. A gift to you, producers of Dark Side of the Ring. There's our 10 pitches, and if you want people you want to interview for the XPW episode, hit us up.
Yeah, we know a couple other people you could talk to as well.
Yeah, totally. Anyways, let us know what you guys think in the comments. Drop us some more ideas for Dark Side Season 3. Hopefully we'll get back to that. They'll get back to this when all this business with the pandemic is said and done, man.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks so much for watching. We appreciate it. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.